Imagine this. You are standing in a field before sunrise. The air is cold, damp, and heavy with mist. Men are vomiting from fear. The smell of wet mud mixes with sweat and horse dung. Archers are planting wooden stakes into the soft soil, testing the tension of their longbows. The creak of wood and string cuts through the uneasy silence. This is not Hollywood. This is real medieval warfare, and today you are going to see the truth behind battles like Agincourt in 1415 and Crécy in 1346. The truth about kings like Henry V and Edward III, and how ordinary soldiers lived, fought, and died far from cinematic glory. Most people imagine medieval battles as clean, heroic duels. Knights in shining armor line up, horns blow, men charge, swords clash, and a hero triumphs. But real warfare was nothing like this. It was slower, dirtier, and far more terrifying. The first thing to understand is that battles were shaped by the ground itself. Weather mattered more than courage. Mud mattered more than armor. And disease killed more men than swords ever could. Take the battlefield environment. At Crécy or Agincourt, you were not standing on a manicured field. You were sinking into thick, sticky clay. The northern French soil turned treacherous after rain. Knights could barely run. Horses slipped. Men sank. At Agincourt, many soldiers literally drowned in the mud. They fell and could not rise again in the weight of their armor. No cinematic heroic charge here. Only a slow, terrifying struggle through sludge and the noise. Forget the calm, dramatic soundtrack of movies. Real battles were deafening.
Hold the line! Hold the line!
Thousands of men shouted orders, screamed in terror, prayed desperately, and clanged metal. Horses snorted and fell, arrows whistled, drums beat, horns blew. You could barely hear your commander over the chaos. Many soldiers didn't even know what was happening around them. They fought because the man next to them moved, not because anyone gave a clear order. Now let's talk about the real killers. Not swords, not duels between knights. The deadliest weapon was the longbow. At Crécy and Agincourt, English archers could fire 10 to 12 arrows per minute. Multiply that by thousands of archers, and you have a storm of death raining down. These arrows pierced armor, felled knights, and killed horses, often before the riders even reached the enemy lines. Panic spread faster than swords ever could. This is why kings like Edward III and Henry V relied on strategy, not bravery alone.
Keep your ranks tight. Wait for my signal.
Cavalry charges were risky. Archers and foot soldiers formed the backbone of defense. Wooden stakes hammered into the ground stopped charging horses cold. Cavalry that ignored them often impaled themselves before reaching the English lines. Real medieval commanders were tacticians, not cinematic heroes. Now, imagine being an average soldier. You are shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of men, packed so tightly that you can barely lift your arms. Your helmet blocks much of your vision. Swinging a sword freely is impossible. At Agincourt, French knights pressing forward became so compressed that some suffocated while standing. Didn't die in glorious duels. They died crushed under the weight of their own army. If you fell, dozens could step over you, pushing your face into mud. Many never rose again. And
Get them off me! I can't breathe! Help!
the fear was relentless. Soldiers vomited or fainted before battle. They prayed, cried, and clutched small religious charms.
May this keep me alive.
Night before Agincourt, English soldiers were exhausted, hungry, and terrified. Their boots were worn through, their clothes soaked. Many had dysentery. They were marching into battle already weakened, carrying the invisible burden of sickness and exhaustion. The enemy wasn't just across the battlefield. It was disease, cold, hunger, and sheer terror. Kings, like Henry V and Edward III, are often shown in movies charging at the front. The reality is different. They were brilliant planners. Their victories came from discipline, battlefield selection, and strategy. Henry V won Agincourt by placing his army in a narrow field surrounded by woods. The French, forced into a funnel, became trapped in mud where numbers became a liability. Edward III at Crécy positioned his army on a slope, with archers spread out, protected and ready. French knights charged uphill, exhausted and vulnerable to English arrows. Both kings won not with heroics, but with careful planning. Life after combat was equally grim. Battlefields were not glorious. They were chaotic scenes of bodies, mud, broken weapons, dying horses, and wounded men screaming for help. Soldiers stripped armor from the dead. Some killed wounded enemies because they could not spare prisoners. Disease spread fast. The stench of blood, sweat, and rotting flesh was overpowering. Camp life offered no relief. Water was scarce and often filthy. Food rotted quickly. Clothes were rarely dry. Cuts and minor injuries could become deadly infections.
It burns. I can't move it.
Fleas, lice, and vermin were constant companions. Fear of disease was as real as fear of the enemy. Sleeping on wet, cold ground was the norm. Soldiers stitched torn clothing, scavenged for scraps, and tried to survive in unimaginable conditions. So why does Hollywood focus on shining knights and choreographed duels? Because real battles are messy, confusing, brutal, impossible to neatly film. The truth lacks glamour. Real warfare had no clean lines, no predictable heroics, and no cinematic music. It was unpredictable, crowded, muddy, and horrifying. Yet this truth makes history more fascinating. Strategy mattered more than sword skill. Weather could determine the outcome of a battle. Ordinary soldiers, not noble knights, carried the day. Victories were measured by endurance, discipline, and survival, not glory. If you want to imagine medieval combat, erase the movie soundtrack from your mind. Replace shiny armor with mud up to your knees. Replace choreographed duels with arrows raining from the sky. Replace heroic speeches with screams, prayers, and desperate commands. Imagine men pushing from behind so hard you can barely move. Smell the stench of sweat, blood, and fear. This was the medieval battlefield, a place where most men never saw the enemy who would kill them. Medieval battles were not clean contests of heroism. They were chaotic, brutal, and shaped by forces movies rarely show. Mud, weather, disease, arrows, fear, and strategy were the true powers that decided the fate of kings and kingdoms. And while Hollywood might have simplified the story, the truth is far more intense, terrifying, and human. This is the reality. The glory shown on screen rarely existed. The truth, endless mud, relentless fear, strategy, and survival. And now, having seen it all, perhaps you can appreciate the real courage of those who lived and died on medieval battlefields.